Enter if you dare this ghastly conversation of teens fraught with despair and recent lacerations. Final girl, chase after her, don't let her get away. But first, the Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA.
Welcome to Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA. That's Tim.
That's Andy.
And this is a podcast about horror. Every week, Tim and I are going to dive into a different movie from the horror genre, from the sparkling, diamond-looking, encrusted gems to scary, beheaded, also gems, the back of your video storage shelf. This week, Tim and I are going to be talking about the very recent 2018 Ari Aster film, Hereditary. Tim, I pretty much know the answer to this, but I think it's a good question. How much do you value family? Like, where does family rank in your life?
Oh, it's extremely high. And that's based on a lot of different things. Not only just from the basic biology and genetics and family history and where we come from and our ethnicity, which as you know, I'm a huge fan of. But also just, I guess the older that I get, the more thankful that I am for the little bits and pieces that I've picked up from my family, whether it was, mainly my mom and dad, my sister, aunts and uncles and cousins, like everything. It's like a beautiful catalog that you have to pick from to build who you are as a person. And so it's kind of nice, like being able to look back now, being older, and saying like, wow, I'm glad that I got like my dad's wit or my mom's kind of empathic nature and those sorts of things. So yeah, it's hugely valuable and super important to me. And then of course being a father was probably the only thing that kept me from, jail or the grave. So that's insanely important to me.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good, because this is a movie very much about family and the importance of family, or the importance of maybe keeping your family at bay.
Right.
Your family is not your friend. I'll take it the darker route, because that's kind of I like my family, my very immediate family. Yes, being like a dad had like changed my life 20 years ago. But yeah, as far as I love my parents and my brother, but as far as that, like, if I never saw another member of my family again, I'd be all right. Not like I don't want them, wish them ill, but I don't really keep in contact with anyone, besides the occasional Instagram, hey, how you doing? I'm going to comment on your picture or something like that.
Well, that's part of the beauty of family, that especially if we're talking like aunts and uncles and cousins and stuff, that you can go, a good 10 years between funerals and then just kind of, you pick up right where you left off whenever you do reconnect.
But there are a lot of people and a lot of cultures where the extended family is the immediate family. You know what I'm saying? Like,
oh yeah,
there's a lot held in that, and I just I don't have it. I don't know if I inherited that from another family member. But also, I don't have a cool, interesting heritage. I'm like Irish and English, so like I could not be more white.
Yeah, there's some,
and a little German. So
yeah.
I got a smidge of fascism tucked deep inside me.
Just enough to make it spicy.
Right.
No, that's and you know me. I mean, I am just gaga over ethnic background and different cultural studies and the differences there, and I do think that it's something that in this day and age is getting sort of I don't want to say forgotten or watered down or it's less important, but I know that young people don't probably value it as much, or they're not as concerned with it as, say, like our grandparents' generation, where, you know, like if like my sister brought a new boy over to my grandparents' house in high school, my grandpa would want to know what's his last name so he could figure out what people he comes from, you know.
Sure.
Not in a bad way, but it's just like, you know, that was just, I don't know, I guess it was a lot more valid when you had a time of a lot more larger sets of immigration, you know, people coming from Eastern Europe or wherever they were coming from. And so it was probably just a lot more immediate of a discussion at that time. But
Sure.
no, that stuff is hugely or hugely important to me. What's also really cool about family is that the older that you get, I've found, the more willing, especially I think this goes for parents, the more willing your parents are to, I don't want to say share family secrets, but they're willing to more openly discuss things that are outside of the norm.
Honest.
Yeah, honest and maybe even a
Where you're
little.
not just basically holding an elder to a regard because they're an elder, because we're all people and we all have our foibles and our flaws. And, you know,
Exactly.
instead of
And I
being like, oh, your grandfather, while you loved him, was an abusive alcoholic. But, you know, do you tell your kid about that or not?
Yeah,
Is
you
that what you're
don't.
saying?
Well, yes, but also even maybe some things that are even a little bit more on the fringe of what would be considered normal. Like, for example, if you have a family member who it very much believes in the ability to connect with deceased folks.
Sure. Sure.
That you know, things that go a little bit more outside of the norm of reality, or what's accepted reality, that, you know, that's not something that a parent necessarily shares with their kid when their kid's 6 years old.
Right.
But as you get older, and maybe you even kind of ask a few questions and you start to get longer answers, it's pretty fascinating what you might end up finding out about these people that you've known your whole life, but maybe didn't quite have, you know, a full view into who they really are or what they really believe in, which is pretty fascinating. It can be pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think it ties in pretty well in this movie. Because
I'd
the
say so.
grandma is someone with a very mysterious past. Okay, before anything, boom. Okay, before we talk about anything else, we're going to do Nan Sum, but even before I do that, this movie is only 2 years old. It's heavy spoiler alert. We will be talking freely about this movie. I don't think you can really talk about it without spoiling much, or without, you're going to spoil something. You can't talk about this
Yeah.
movie without revealing it. Because I don't think the trailers, and I think that's really what hooked me in the first time I watched it. I don't think the trailers really give you an idea of what this movie is. I think it is misleading, purposefully misleading, because there are events that completely shattered what I expected this movie to be. So, having said that, real quick, here's Nan Sum. This is a story of the Graham family. The matriarch of the family has just passed away, and so it's the family dealing, mainly the mother, dealing with that death and the slow realization of who this person was that they didn't really know. You know, I don't want to spoil too much in the sum, but I mean that's basically the summary. Is the
Yeah.
reveal of who her mother really was and her
Yes.
perception, something like that.
No, that's exactly right. And what's funny is, not only do you not want to give spoilers too early, this movie doesn't want to give spoilers about itself in itself. Like, it does not spoon feed the audience at all. And Lord knows we will get to that later, because there's a whole big fancy term for what this film uses to purposely hide things from you or keep
Oh,
things from you or make you feel unsettled.
well, what is
And
it? Just tell me now.
it's a Brechtian distancing technique.
Okay.
And we'll talk all about that. It's some pretty fascinating stuff. Um, but yeah, and you're exactly right. When the trailers for this movie came out, they were extremely effective in that they just used really bold, simple statements like scary as hell, or this is the scariest movie I've ever seen, or it was just kind of quick reviews like that. And then it just had some images that looked really unsettling or
Yeah.
creepy.
Well, it prominently features the daughter, Charlie, played
Yeah,
by Millie. I didn't have my cast up yet. Sorry, Millie Shapiro, who actually came from Broadway, but she has a. Hold on, let me get the name of this right. Uh, Cleidocranial dystosis. Cleidocranial dystosis. That's what she has, and it's like it's where like the collarbone don't form all the way, and you have a lot of like jaw and nose, like those kind of cave in a little
yeah,
bit. Um, and not to be disparaging, but it looks kind of weird. It's not a symptom you see a lot of, or a condition you see. So it does look unique, and it's a horror movie. And here's a weird looking kid. So you're just like, oh, this movie is about this weird little kid.
right. And you're exactly right. When you were watching the trailer and seeing her, you're like, okay, this person is interesting looking. Like I'm not used to really seeing somebody that looks like that. It wasn't, it's not really a comment on who she is, but it
No,
it was enough. It was enough to catch your eye and be like, oh, that's interesting. And which that we're going to definitely talk about that when we get to the cast
well, and
because
you can't look at that and not be like, that's probably factored into the movie. Like her unique look is addressed in the movie, and it is not. It's
yeah,
not. It's
not
not
o-
a thing at all.
not only that, but there's a whole other thing that I can't wait to ask you about. So I'm really interested to see how you feel about some of the casting in this with regard to what we were talking about earlier with uh, family ethnicity and that sort of thing, and what's called colorblind casting. Because I know when I first was watching this movie, I had some questions as to whether or not I was supposed to be perceiving something in a certain way, if it was intentional, and so, her appearance, her brother's appearance in the film, a couple of these things I had some questions about. So we'll
It's funny you
definitely get
say
to
that because I looked at it and I was like, oh, they cast based on nose because Tony Collette and the two kids both have prominent. They all three have a prominent nose.
yeah,
And so I was
no,
like,
that's true.
oh, is that the bridge? That's actually a pretty good casting.
Yeah, no, that and some of what I was talking about with that that distancing effect or that Brechtian effect might even be playing into things because a big part of that technique is to unsettle or throw off your audience. So, but before all that happens, this A24 studio that put this movie out
Yes.
ultimately, um, kind of an interesting studio in and of themselves. They sort of focus on like heavily artistic movies that have a unique look to them, a unique tone to them, not really your typical Hollywood spoon-fed stuff.
Right.
And God, they did it because nobody else did apparently for a decade when they tried to make it.
They're like the millennial Miramax.
Yes. No,
Yeah,
that's
they're
great.
kind
Yeah,
of
that's
that next gen indie movies where they're like, because I was just perusing some stuff on the internet and people were talking about the movie Kids and like, you know, how did people even see this movie? Or, it was big for the indie scene, and I was like, that's a movie that was like helped launch the indie scene as we
yes.
know indie films, which is now those are not indie films really anymore. I don't know. There's I don't know. It's a weird shift. But now, yeah, A24 has kind of picked up that mantle with, yeah, as you said, yes, they're insanely artistically driven. They are like creator driven. They don't seem to interfere much in the movies that they produce.
Right. from what I've looked at here, Ari Aster, the writer and director, this was something that he wanted to do. It was a film that he wanted to do for a very long time, and apparently, what kind of held up the process was that he, as a creator, was particularly interested in these family dramas, family tragedies, and that's really what inspires him the most. He did say, or he has said, that he is a horror fan and went through a stage as an adolescent where he was really into horror movies, but that ultimately he picked the horror genre simply because he thought it would be the easiest way to get it financed.
Yeah,
That,
and he's right.
just trying to sell a family tragedy grief movie doesn't get a lot of people worked up and excited who have, the money that you need to make it. And, you and I talk about this a fair amount in the podcast, but there is, rightly or wrongly, you can't overstate the importance of money in making any of these films come to life, whether it's the micro budget stuff that we've covered or some of the more mainstream things. Sadly, because we're talking about art here, you would think that just the world would be accepting and that the universe would naturally allow these things to just happen.
Right.
But
everyone loves art.
right. But it is so extremely dependent on the funds actually getting generated to make these things happen.
But this budget was still relatively small. I mean, this movie was made for $10 million, which I was curious how that ranked up to some of the older movies we've done. So I put it in like a little inflation calculator, and this would be like a $3.5 million movie in the mid '80s, which is still a big budget then for a horror movie. But the quality you're getting for that ratio of money to what you would have seen in the mid '80s is insane. Like the leaps and bounds, just the visual of this movie is able to give you. Like, it seems like a $35 million movie.
And that's why they actually chose to film in Utah, because they got the biggest tax breaks.
Yeah,
they got
I think the only movie I've ever seen filmed in Utah. It has to be.
Right. Yeah, there's not a lot of it, but yeah, apparently they're giving tax breaks and benefits to.
They thank the Utah Film Commission, and that was created the day before.
Right. Utah itself is like, we have a film commission?
Yeah, they're like, no, thank you for forcing us to create this.
Right. But you're right. It was a resounding success at 80 million box office versus that 10 million in budget.
Worldwide. So, for 40 domestic, but still, I mean, that's 4 times your budget. The A24's biggest movie up to this point.
Oh yeah. And it was it's amazing that it did as well as it did, and it got as big as it did for as personal of a movie as it is, because while the director has been particularly tight-lipped about the specific kind of bits and pieces and ingredients into the origin of this story, he has at least been forthcoming with saying that it's a very personal work. It's pretty easy to infer that he's relaying things directly back to his own immediate family. Again, he hasn't been specific about that, and the one major real kind of knock your block off literally moment in this movie is actually inspired by a true event that does not have to do with his family. It has to do with a death that happened in Georgia between 2 adolescents. But the tone of the movie, the movie itself being about how grief can not only cause a family to suffer, but to permanently alter people.
Yeah.
That's a very personal origin story from him.
Which he I feel like he just he had a story about grief, and he's like, no one wants to see that So he's, like trying to get your dog to take medicine. Like he put this story of grief into the, piece of beef and served it like,
Right.
here's your red meat that you want, everyone, as a horror movie. And as you're eating it, then finally, when you get to the pill, you're like, oh, wait, you tricked me. This movie is about emotion, God damn it.
That's exactly right. And I think you're 100% right. He set out to do that. He set out to say, like, I'm going to make my family tragedy movie. And if it means twisting it into a fucked up nightmare by the end of it, then that's what we'll do.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get it made. And so, and I think it works as a nice balance. I will say though, and Lord knows I've got a lot to say about how I reacted to this film. I have very mixed feelings about this movie, but I have at least gotten to the point where I realize that I'm not ever about to condemn this movie because it is so accomplished and it's so well done. It just might not be the horror movie style that I like. And that doesn't mean that
Right.
it's bad.
No.
It just means that it might not be my flavor.
But as
So-
we've established in my love for pretension, as I was watching this, I was like, oh, this is why this movie affected me like it did. Like, this is my peanut butter and jelly, like pretension and horror smashed together. And it's like, tastes so good.
It's very you. It's very academic. It's very technical, and like yes, it would 1,000% appeal to you.
Yeah.
Not to
Well,
say
and
that.
especially, and I'll say I agree with you because there were bits in this movie. We'll kind of jump real quick into, she does a seance with her friend Joan. Annie does, and just her reaction, like in this movie there's never a because there are ghosts and things in this movie which I don't subscribe to, but I feel like the people reacting to it, is genuine. There's because in a lot of movies with ghosts, people react weird or like blasé almost about it, like, whoa, there's a ghost in here, that's weird. But like the way Toni Collette is freaking out during her first seance, and she doesn't know what to do because she does live in a reality, and I'm sure, and I don't get anything from her character that makes her believe in ghosts and things like that. So to actually experience that, and for her brain to not being making sense of it and trying to make sense, but and she's getting all this stimuli all at once and can't comprehend it, like that is such a genuine reaction. And the family's reaction too when they do the seance at their house, it all feels very real of how someone who is not particularly in that belief system would respond to it, to actually being confronted by it. And I really respected that, admired that in the writing.
Yes, yeah, this movie does not do a lot of hand holding. It doesn't try to pull the audience into believing something outside of their own belief system. What's nice is what you just said, that when an audience or when a character is experiencing something for the first time, it doesn't feel like we as an audience know what's coming, and now we just have to watch the character struggle through it. And
right. Like I've seen ghost movies, and here's how you act in a ghost movie.
Right. This movie was kind of had a little bit more immediacy, and we're not finding out anything more before the characters are finding it out. So that makes it, yeah, a lot
which
more.
Which I think is a part of why audiences responded so poorly to it, because critically, a critical darling, like we're at like near 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, but the audience score is, depending on where you look, middling 50-60%. And I think it's because so now here we come in, heavy spoilers. The grandma's involved in a cult. So as we experience more of the cult stuff, it goes from, here's something I can relate to, maybe losing a family member, how hard it is on my family. Now I've lost a child, just compiling grief, and I've experienced those emotions before. Now you're throwing cult shit at me? Well, like, this isn't what I signed up for. But yeah, you're experiencing it from the family's perspective. as well, where they're just like, I'm sorry, I thought I was just dealing with my dead mother, but now it's a king of hell. I'm sorry, what?
Right, right. Well, I'm super excited to dive into all that stuff. Let's just ramble through the cast real quick because I did really want to ask you real quick about some of the casting what I was talking about with what's referred to as colorblind casting. So, interestingly enough, the actor Alex Wolff, who plays the son, the teenage 16-year-old son
Peter.
in the movie, yeah, Peter. Um, I guess, and I don't want to make this too much about race. I guess he's Caucasian in the sense that he's Jewish, but he does have a certain
He's olive complected.
yeah, he's olive complected, and I just it doesn't bother me one way or another. I'm not a racist, but what I was questioning as an audience member was, am I to believe that he is their biological son?
Right.
And not that it really became, I mean, after about 15 or 20 minutes, it's not really a big deal anyway, but it was enough of a jarring casting decision that I was kind of like, that's a really strong choice. And not that genetics can't do some funny things from generation to generation, but did you feel, I know they've got the nose thing, like you said,
Right.
but did you feel like the casting appearances were a little disjointed somehow?
I mean, yeah, it is. Uh, I wouldn't say it's distracting. I mean, yeah, the first time you're kind of like, oh, okay, this kid's the son. But I have friends. Uh, I have one friend. She had 3 children, and one is considerably darker skinned than the other two. Not in a like a something something you're not telling us dark, but um, definitely different off the hue. Um,
Right.
so it's not that it can't happen, but yes, there is also an underlying question of you can't trust anything that's happened in this family. And I don't think they're alluding to it, but there is a possibility that Annie was maybe impregnated by someone else in an attempt to further this the ritual that they're trying to do to bring forth King Payment.
Right.
So yeah, I mean it's distinctly possible. I think it's a cool little just hanging question. Is this her biological kid? It doesn't really factor into it or not, but
Yeah,
it's
enough.
within the bounds of the movie that could not be that it's her by actually I mean I think it's hers biologically. It might not be her husband's biologically. That's
Right.
what I'm getting at.
Right, right. And yeah, but and what a just to speak more directly to the cast and the talent themselves, an outstanding cast. I
My
mean,
God.
even Gabriel Byrne, who isn't given a whole huge ton of stuff to work with, gives such a sort of like a precise performance of a man who is definitely going through some horrible emotional things, but he's also trying to be usually when a like a mother and a father, or I should say, when a parents lose a child, one of them is weak or I mean allows themselves to be completely debilitated, and the other one sort of assumes the position of I'm going to be the strength in this,
Right.
and he's far and away that.
Oh my
And he
God.
really,
It's so subtle and he doesn't everyone else is so over the top. Um and he doesn't his character doesn't get to do that, but it comes through when he's sitting in the car and starts crying. That's amazing. And my favorite part though is he makes dinner and Peter's like, "This is really good dinner, Dad." And like just the way he says thank you, and it's like internally he's like, I'm doing the right thing. This might not be something I do normally, but I'm stepping up. I've made my son feel a little better, at least for temporarily. He's enjoying something, and that like brings him joy.
yeah, I'm doing the
Oh,
best I can.
yeah,
Yeah,
so good.
you know,
Oh,
yeah, just it really, really. I mean, that's some. I don't want to take the emotion away from it by calling it technical acting, but that's some beautiful technique.
Yeah,
I
we
mean,
just
that's
call that acting. Yeah.
yeah, right, right. And and granted, this probably won't register with a huge portion of our audience, but didn't he remind you a lot of Brujas?
Yes. Yeah.
There is a father
I
of,
mean, not as he's dialed the corn down to about 2, but
right. But I mean, just a learned man, a measured man, a logical man, but definitely forced to go through some very, very heavy duty things. And then
yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm gonna throw you for a loop right now, because I know Toni Collette gets a crap ton of accolades for this movie, and she deserves every bit of those. I'm not about to take that away.
Yeah.
But my favorite actress in this whole, or actor in this whole movie, is Ann Dowd, who plays Joan.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Ann Dowd is a legend. She's
I
a legendary actress of the subset of actors where you see them and go, "Oh, I know that person. How do I know that person?" Like Ann
Right.
Dowd is like the Ronnie Cox. She's like the female Ronnie Cox.
Right. I kind of see her as like she has nice shout out for Ronnie Cox
Yeah, I
right
gotta
there. I
get
mean,
you.
he doesn't get a lot of love.
I just rewatched RoboCop, so
So she's kind of what I would say actually an even more talented and like far less self-aware Kathy Bates is how I would put it. Like
Okay.
just one of those actors that it doesn't matter is when they come on the screen or what comes out of their mouth, instantly believable. And not only that, but that character has to go through a real transformation from grieving themselves to now believing in the reality or the validity of being able to communicate with the dead, and she sells it.
Wait, Ann
with
Dowd? No, I don't think she did that at all. She's the leader of the cult.
Right, but
I don't think she was grieving anything ever.
But we were supposed to be.
Oh yeah.
You don't think that she actually had a grandson that died?
Maybe, but I don't think she is grieving it because she can communicate with him easily. This isn't like she's like when she's like, "Oh, Annie," or "I just, did this seance." I don't think she just had done that seance. Like that's something she has known how to do and has done probably several times.
Yeah, no,
it might not even be her grandson that she's talking
that's
to.
true. That's true. And but at least she's selling. At least even if her
I totally believe that. Yes, she
right.
was a sympathetic.
Yes,
agent.
That's the perfect word.
Yeah.
And she plays that really. I have to say, if she wasn't an evil person to start with, really plays it like very delightfully. I mean, it's just she seems like such a sweet, good person.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's and there are people that round out the rest of the cast. But now we can get to the juicy stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
So
our big three.
What? Yeah. That as far as the
actors go,
yeah. So let me talk a little bit real quick about that. I mentioned that Brechtian distancing effect. So this was first used in theater, and what its intention is that a production purposely unsettles its audience so that they don't feel that sort of comfort in observing a story, like just gently being told to them, in front of them, for them. It instead is sometimes it's self-aware, like the actors will break the fourth wall. Sometimes the actors will be aware of themselves being in a play. Sometimes the musical score can be really jarring and unsettling. Sometimes the narrative that has taken you on such a journey will take a violent or sudden shift in tone. And what that does is it disrupts the viewer's experience and just sort of empathizing with these characters as characters in a story, and is meant to elicit a more immediate reaction to what they're seeing.
Okay.
And it's kind of like the dead opposite of Spielberg movie making. Like Spielberg just wants to take your hand and walk you over to a blanket in the field and just sit you down and tell you the whole story
Right.
and fill in all the gaps and make sure that you're comfortable in understanding everything that you're seeing.
Sure.
This is the opposite of that. So you actually had Ari Aster going to the person who wrote the score and saying to that composer, I want this to be evil. I want it to sound like it's toxic. I want the audience to feel like they're ingesting something that is bad for them. And that was actually the notes that he gave to the person who wrote the musical score. So there's that element. There's the element in that gorgeous introduction shot that we get where we're zooming into the
Oh,
miniatures.
yeah.
Um,
Which is a
that thing,
huge, like, it really sets up the metaphor for the movie there of them
right,
being dolls and puppets and controlled by this unknowingly being controlled. Which
right,
I love that opening shot because yeah, as it shows because Annie works in miniatures. She is an artist and she has an upcoming show at a gallery. That's kind of the running subplot for her, like trying to get ready for this showing. And yeah, we zoom in on Peter's room, and I'm certain for this shot as it comes in and then you see Peter in bed and Steve comes in because they're going to the funeral. It opens with them going to the mom's funeral or the grandmother's funeral. I am certain, and it looks cool, but I'm sure they, somehow superimposed Steve and Peter in the room because that room is still the miniature. There are a lot of shots of the house that are the miniature version of the house, but it just looks like a normal shot. Because the house itself, gorgeous. I love this house. Is the exteriors are real, but the interior, that's all a soundstage. And they were able to take giant walls off, so you can get these just full panel shots like you're looking inside a dollhouse. And they're just and it's a big spacious house anyway, because dollhouses I feel are kind of the rooms are always like a weird setup where like a normal house wouldn't be, but they're set up because it's a dollhouse. And this house has large open rooms and they're all like near like the same size or like placed right next to each other. It's the house is kind of symmetrical, like Peter's room and Charlie's room are on opposite ends of this hallway. But yeah, there are a couple shots in that where I think the big one I really noticed was when Peter has an accident at school and they're calling the house, and it's you hear the phone ringing and it's panning through. That is the miniature of the house, and then they do the thing where it transitions through a wall to the next room, and you get the studs of the wall. Now we're in a real room, but they do a
yeah.
lot of that where they show, and they also do something I really thought was cool because I love. Do you know what tilt shift is in photography?
No, I haven't
Okay,
heard of that.
it's where, and it's probably pictures you've seen before, and it's just a picture. It's usually of like the larger the scope is, like a landscape or like a full city or something like that. And then if you take out the focus of the top and the bottom of the picture, it gives this weird effect for the middle of the picture to look like a miniature, like you're looking at something small and can't get the whole focus of that picture in. So there are a
Huh.
lot of shots of the house, and there's a couple of the tree house that they use this tilt shift. So now while those are real, they look like miniatures or they look like built. It's very
Oh,
cool.
that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, look up
Yeah.
some tilt shift pictures. Like they're like of cities and stuff. It looks like someone just made a miniature model of the city, but it's just a normal picture altered a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much thought goes into this movie. It you can't help but feel like it's a sort of natural progression of some of Stanley Kubrick's work. That sort of those real long takes, the distanced shots, um, feeling a little bit less connected to what you're seeing, and it's a little bit more antiseptic. Even though you're right, the interiors of this house, even though they're on a soundstage, are gorgeous. I'm like, everything in this house is old, and I think that that's on purpose. I
Hmm.
think that we're dealing with kind of these ancient forces.
Sure.
The one thing that I was really taken with, and I'm going to tell you about a funny rabbit hole that I stopped myself from going down, but there are so many lights in this movie. I don't mean light sources. I mean actual practical light devices, lamps and wall lamps and everything. I mean, there's just things that create light all over this place, whether they're on or not.
Right.
And I started questioning, like, what's the significance of this? And I was thinking about just words. And I thought of, this is the embarrassing rabbit hole. I thought of like, what lamps do? They shine. And then I started thinking of these characters.
Oh no.
Annie,
Oh.
Charlie, Stephen, King, Paimon. I mean, like I went down this Stephen King rabbit hole for a second, and I'm like, is this like a giant homage to Stephen King? But I stopped myself. But what I did settle on, and again, this is pure speculation, is that maybe there's something to what a light is as a metaphor, where it's sort of an empty vessel until it's filled with the electricity that makes it become what it is. So that's just my thought. I could be completely wrong, but it's just an idea.
Oh, that's a
But
fun.
yes,
That's what movies are supposed to do.
yeah,
Listen, insane rabbit holes.
right. But I want to talk now. This is the thing that I'm most excited to talk about with you, because I don't know if we felt the same about this or different. I have never had a movie that I only really started to like more because I was reading about it more as opposed to just watching it than this movie. I liked this movie far better reading about it than I did actually watching it. Now, I'm going to be honest with you here. I like to be fucking hardcore, and I don't like to fast forward through anything, and I don't like to say that anything is too much when it comes to art. But I will be honest with you, knowing what was coming, I actually fast forwarded through the death scene and the reaction. I could not take it.
Listen, I don't doubt you, because it is impactful. Because I've mentioned before, I saw this on a plane. So yeah, all right, here we go. Huge spoiler scene, but this scene is crucial and probably the most impactful scene in the movie. But yeah, Charlie gets her head knocked off. And the brother's reaction, because he's driving, his reaction is, again, one of these, it's so, I think, so accurate to where he just sits there and like, it's like in his mind, he does all the things he should do to make sure she's okay. Like and they do this with the camera where he just kind of glances up at the rear view mirror, and as soon as he just sees just a corner of her sweatshirt, he's back on the road. So it's like in his mind, he's like, okay, I've checked, I've looked. He kind of squeaks out just I don't even know, it's just kind of this inaudible, Charlie, but he's, his just tears are streaming down his face. But now he's like, talk to her. Is she okay? She hasn't replied yet, but she hasn't said she's hurt, so maybe everything's all right. And he just drives off. And now you've got, 2.5 minutes of just silence where you are feeling the same thing he is. Like, no one's breathing during this part, right? And again, because it's also the shock if you have seen the trailers for it and you think this movie is going to be about this girl, and 20 minutes in, she's dead. Now you're just like, well, now I don't know what to expect now.
Right.
And so I'll say this. So I'm watching this on a plane, right? And my jaw is open. It's now this long drawn out process. He drives home, he goes up, he lays in bed, he just lays there. You hear, and it's now morning, he's laying there, obviously not slept, but he just, it's that. And I think everyone has experienced this at one time before, where something's weighing on your mind and you just lay it in bed and you just like stare at the wall and you're just thinking. That's all you're doing is thinking, and your mind doesn't know how not to think. And you hear Annie go out to the car, and you hear her discover the body without seeing it, and she's screaming, and then we immediately cut to the cemetery, and she's screaming and crying, and you're still like not breathing. Like the emotional train is just barreling along. And then it cuts to her bedroom, and she is just on the floor screaming, I want to die. Like, she cannot handle it. And it's slowly pausing into the hallway just to show Peter standing there, and he's doing that human thing of, I'm not brave enough to confront this, but I feel like even though I'm within the vicinity of her, I'm somehow being supportive of her, or I'm still being a part of this because I know I caused it. As I'm watching that on the plane, as she's screaming, I want to die, it pauses. We get a captain's announcement and then a 2-minute United Airlines credit card commercial. But I still sat there gaping at the screen as I watched this dumbass commercial. And as soon as it cut back in, I was fucking right back into it. Like, that is a testament to how expertly crafted that whole sequence is. And
Well, yes.
Like, there's no, I don't care how like cool you think you are or tough you think you are, like, to not have a reaction. I mean, when my daughter watches with me, she could not be more cynical. And the way she screamed when she sees Charlie's head was, I'll do another deep dive internet reference here. We just celebrated 9/11 here the other day. And there's this video that gets posted every year called Megan Drinking Apple Juice. And it's just a NYU student and her friends on 9/11, like sitting in their apartment, kind of watching things happen. But they're, already casually just like, we're drinking apple juice and vodka. And then the first tower collapses, and the way this girl screams, like it's mid-sentence, she's like, yeah, don't worry, Mom. I'm like, that's the way like my kid screamed when she saw Charlie's head. Like, it was just like because even she was like, well, is she dead? Like, she's dead, right? But I don't think it had hit her yet that she had no head.
Right. No, and the thing for me is that, and I'm going to ultimately start with this as a positive. Anytime a movie can still have the power to affect somebody to the point where they're having a really uncomfortable time watching it, or in my case where I refuse to watch it, that ultimately is, I'm not going to put down a movie for that. In fact, it's actually a huge achievement. If you have ever had the horrible displeasure of being the first person to tell somebody that a very close family member has died, and you hear that reaction for the first time, I'm here to tell you from personal experience, it's awful, and I hope that nobody listening ever has to do that, because it's horrendous. And the movie really captured that to great detail, to the point that I just didn't want to relive that again.
Yeah. But I think a lot of it too is it's that, and it's probably the parents in us that speak to it, but it's involuntarily harming someone you love, like accidentally, like the guilt of that, man. I don't know if I'd be able to get over that, and I'm pretty cynical myself, but man.
Well, and I'll tell you the other side of that was, and I try to share a lot of personal things, and some things should be kept private, but if there's somebody that is in your life or that you're close to who has special needs, you worry about everyone that you love, and the thoughts of them preoccupy your mind at all times. But it's just like anything else. When something is more fragile, you just worry about it that much more. So you kind of torture yourself with these thoughts of what would happen if something ever happened to this thing, that this person that might be in some ways more fragile than others, or somehow less capable of fighting their way through a bad situation. And so if you have anybody like that in your life, and then you see this person who they beautifully depict on the film, they don't get really specific with what her mental abilities are or disabilities, or they don't really mention it.
Yeah, I don't feel like there's any. It seems like her weakness is nuts. Like, that seems to be the only issue that she has. Like, she goes into anaphylactic shock after eating this cake with nuts in it. And there's a bit earlier where she's eating chocolate. Yes, she is. Well, and here's the thing. I don't know. And I think this is something that got lost on me until I started reading about it. were you under the impression King Payman was already in her?
No, that
Right,
was
you
that
don't.
no.
But
That
it
was
is.
one of
But
those.
he is.
Yeah, and that's why like here was my biggest problem with this movie when I first saw it. I said, I think there is a way better movie on the cutting room floor. I said that. I'm like, I loved what I saw, but I think I
There's
needed a
about
little.
40 minutes on the cutting room floor, so there's almost another movie on the cutting room floor.
Right, right. And it's not like I need to be spoon fed. I can sit through a slow burn mid '90s early indie movie with the best of them. But I mean, it just really felt like there were some holes in this in the storytelling and the
Yeah.
narrative, which I now know are sort of done on purpose. It's just that style of storytelling. But no, I did not gather that at all.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure.
But I think a lot more makes sense knowing that.
Yeah.
A lot of things
sure.
where you're just like, this just seems like a weird choice or something weird that happens.
Right.
Or why is
Right.
this happening? But that part's never explained.
And I think it kind of speaks to what I wanted to talk about with you as far as the overall tone of this movie, and that maybe this movie is the first true millennial horror classic. In that I feel like its tone, which to me feels hopeless and almost nihilistic,
Yeah.
might appeal more to millennials because they have.
They get it. They get that.
Yeah, they get it.
All they've known.
They have that, like, sort of beautiful self-deprecating humor, and they inject a lot of like despair into their lives. But it's just kind of like the tone of millennials, and I'm not putting that down. I'm just saying it's kind of a tonal shift from Gen X to, like, every generation has a tonal shift. So. Yeah. I think for them watching this movie, that might just reverberate with them a little bit better. Whereas me, I know we all know what I like. I like the goofy stuff, the teens running through the woods, the guitar drills, the nudity, the fun, sexy, goofy horror stuff. Yeah. And this movie has none of that. And
now hold on. Well, okay, good. Finish your thought. Finish your thought.
Oh, yeah, no. Oh, it's got some nudity, all right.
Okay, now that's what we're going to talk about.
But no, I disliked this. I should say I inappropriately prejudged this movie because I just didn't feel like it was fun enough. And that's a horrible way of stating it, but the movie is no fun aside from the fun that you might have observing the technique and the artistry. Like, that is its own brand of fun. But as far as the tonal audience experience, it is not a fun movie.
Nancy said she had fun watching me watch this movie the first time. Look, she's like, I didn't want to see the screen, but watching you gasp and like shake your head, and she said that was a blast.
Yeah, and now I know, especially having read about it, that it's purposely it's meant to disrupt you, and it's not meant to hold your hand, and it's meant to leave you questioning some things. And maybe it's just like trying a new food. It's like trying a new restaurant, a new cuisine, a new culture. Like, the best thing you can do is just try to go into it open-minded and say, okay, let's see what this is all about. I know it's different from what I know, but I'm willing to give it a shot. And I'm glad that I was able to get to that point because it allowed me to appreciate the things that I was already liking that much more.
Yeah. Let's touch something real quick that you mentioned was nudity, because we did. So earlier in the movie, before they go to this party that Charlie gets sick at, Peter's buddy sends him a text. He's like, hey, tomorrow night there's a big party at so-and-so's house. Bring your dick, which I believe was the message Ari Aster sent to all the extras in this movie. Bring your dick. Because, Tim, finally, we've been clamoring for it. We got a lot of dicks in this movie.
Yes. Yeah. And
old people dicks, but beggars can't be choosers.
Right. And by a lot of dicks, we don't necessarily mean a lot per dick. Like, it was more volume than anything.
Yeah.
But no, and you're right. And what a great moment in the movie, because you're already experiencing some things, and you're already going through some rapid fire questions, and you're like, wait, what about this, and what happened there, and was this real?
There
Did
is an
that really happen?
explosion of like magic at the end of this movie.
Yes. And then right in the middle of that magic explosion, we get Dick.
Yeah.
Old Dick. And you're like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And you're like, and especially when
And the
I can't
first
remember,
Dick you see is the creepy guy, because there's a guy at the funeral at the beginning who's like smiling at Charlie. Because there
Yeah.
is throughout this movie little instances of these you catch these cult members, and it's one of those things you might not catch it the first time through or really understand, but after you see it, this cult is watching the family. So the first guy is pretty creepy anyway at the funeral. And of course, everyone's like, I hope I never have to see this guy naked. Boom, first guy you see naked.
right. And then you go into what I feel, if we're just shouting out the unsettling moments here. To me, aside from the head getting knocked off, or the decapitated head in the road, the old nudity, all of the things you see, nothing to me is creepier than two things in pretty quick succession. Toni Collette's character banging her head on the attic door, trying to get in this sort of rapid, like you hear the sound.
Yeah,
and then
he's run up, and you think she's pounding on it with her fists, and when it cuts, she is literally on the ceiling on her hands and knees, banging her head into the door.
Yeah, that's creepy as hell. And then if you thought that was bad, then she's somehow suspended up in the rafters of the attic, and she is using this double-fisted technique of like attempting to decapitate herself with like almost like a piano wire.
Yeah, it's piano wire. Which I don't know where she got the piano wire.
There's a lot of questions happening in that section of the movie right there.
I mean, people assume piano wire, but she's an artist. I'm sure she's got wire. She deals with miniatures. I'm sure she has something like that. But yeah, I mean, yes, we're at the point, and like at the end of this movie, like there's a lot of stuff where normally I would be like, well, that doesn't. How is she floating? Tried to set up rules before, but they don't set up rules, which makes it better for me.
I think that this sort of fantasy element, kind of jarringly inserted into otherwise normal movies, is something that's a lot more popular in. I've seen it in a lot more like Latino-based films where they'll use some fantasy elements. There's that one director that has characters that have like really huge hands or feet, and it was the same guy that directed the video for Foo Fighters, and it's kind of based on Evil Dead. But or like even when Birdman came out with Michael Keaton, there was that sort of fantasy element worked into the end of it where you don't know, does he really have these powers or something? Like you're not really sure. So I think to fans of foreign films, maybe this sort of jarring insertion of fantasy elements might be a little bit more par for the course. Here's something that I think might be a real great suggestion for people who haven't seen this movie, who are now hopefully excited to go see it.
I feel like even knowing about this movie, it's still going to have a visceral effect on you. I don't feel like maybe spoiling Charlie's death is bad, but other than that, it's just you're not prepared. You're not going to be prepared for it, even if you know.
Right. I think the right temperament to go into this movie with is the sort of temperament that you would have when you would watch Twilight Zone episodes. Like Twilight Zone episodes aren't meant to be like necessarily the scariest thing you've ever seen. They're also not necessarily meant to be. They're not meant to really spoon feed you a story. They're meant to sort of trick you a little bit as a viewer, and they're meant to make you feel a little uncomfortable. This is basically like an incredibly well-crafted, full-length Twilight Zone episode. And if you go
where no one died. Wait, isn't that weird that the Twilight Zone movie had a decapitation in it? During the filming? Oh,
yeah, it
brought
did.
it full circle there, Timmy.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even see that one coming. That was.
And if our listeners don't know about that, look that up. Death
Yeah, and it
during Twilight Zone.
killed John Landis's career.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that happened. Unfortunately, yeah, two kids and Vic Morrow, I think was the actor's name.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, this movie it feels like it pulls the rug out from under you, but it wants to do that. It's trying to do that,
Yeah.
and that once you kind of accept that, well, then it's fun. But the thing is, you don't know that going into it, and maybe that's the beauty and the curse of this movie. That if somebody gave you a little bit of insight going into it, you might appreciate it a lot more. But
Yeah.
then again, it might kill some of that sort of really unexpected what the fuck moments that we all had watching it for the first or even second time.
Yeah.
Um,
You're not going to have the shock, but I enjoyed it because I think the first time I watched it, it connected with me so much because of those hard hitting moments. And even though I knew they were coming, I mean, I cried twice watching this movie. When Tony Collette and the kid's name is something Wolf, Alex Wolf, as plays Peter. When they confront each other at dinner, God damn man, like what a scene! Like
yeah,
how I mean, I'll advocate for Tony Collette. She should have got an Oscar nom. Probably Alex Wolff should have as well. I mean, I could see either of them some sort of nomination. I don't care what. And it's just unfortunately horror has this stigma around it. So as long as you label the movie horror, people are not going to take the things in it as seriously as you should. You know, just fucking judge it for what it is. I mean, like we've been in shows and I know some of us like crying on stage more than others, but man, if they were just like, hey, we need you to carry this movie and can you be sad the entire time, that's all you get to be is sad, but we need a large spectrum of sad. Even when you're happy, you're supposed to be sad, and Toni Collette crushes that. Like
she
that's
does.
all she is in this movie is sad until she's like possessed at the end, but it's not her essentially.
Yeah.
Um,
The only, but and yeah, she nails the hell out of it. I'm making more peace with it now, but I wasn't 100% sure that Alex Wolff was hitting the mark every time, because while he hits the mark like 95% of the time, some of his reactions where, and maybe this is a specific choice on his part, and maybe it's okay, but he has these sort of reactions where he's saying like mommy and stuff like that, where his sort of scared or frightened reaction is what you'd expect more from like a 6-year-old than
Yeah.
you would a 16-year-old.
Right.
And it I think it does have an effect, because it kind of makes you even that much more sympathetic toward him, like immediately. But at times it felt, I wasn't really sure if going that far was the right choice, but
I
that's
get you.
that's some severe nitpicking on my part, because the
Yeah,
kid's
total
a great
nitpicking.
actor.
Yeah, there's even a part when they're doing the seance in their house and he starts crying. It feels very forced, but it's like, again, such a
Yeah.
nitpick because like his reaction when he smashes his face on his desk is so good.
Yeah,
So
it is.
good. Terrifying.
And
Like,
that
I don't think any
smile.
kid in that room was acting when they were like looking at him in horror, because even if I knew that guy's acting, damn.
You're right. And that smile that he gives in the reflection in the classroom when that, something is starting to take him over.
Yeah.
Speaking of which,
So smug.
this is one thing that I really want to ask you about before we wrap up, because
Yeah.
are we getting close?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're a little over, but we're fine.
Okay. So, and I'm going to try to ask this as succinctly as possible. What did you think about the whole King Payman thing at the end? Did you feel like it didn't hold up to the rest of what the movie had built up? Did you feel like it was kind of perfect because it was so weird and random, or did you just feel like, what the fuck is this? Like, it's all been
Well,
leading up to this?
yeah, a little bit of all of that. There is a little bit of like, what? There's a part of me, I don't find the devil or demons scary at all. It seems like there's a lot for something so powerful. an evil angel created by the creator of the universe needs such weird specific things just to be in a person. Like, you don't have that power? Like, what are your powers then? Um, but at the same time, that's not the important part. If this movie were about the cult, now we're talking about something else. But this movie is about the victims of a cult. you
Yes.
know and I would even say, because I am shocked. I really thought I was going to talk a lot about Midsummer in this movie. It's Ari Aster's next movie. There are a lot of parallels in the two movies,
Oh yeah.
which are both kind of cult focused. But in Midsummer, the things they're doing are more ritual. In this, it's like there's literal like magic going on, people running on walls and floating, and bodies jumping from one room to another. In Midsummer, there's none of that. So at the end of Midsummer, I don't feel like, oh, they've achieved the spiritual goal they were setting out for. In that movie, maybe we'll cover it someday, I think it's all bullshit, and they're deluding themselves, because their holy book is written by, I don't know a good way to say it. We'll cover that anyway. But but in this one, I'm like, oh, they have summoned that king of hell. But then at the same time, what does he do? Like, what kind of is it some slow burn influence? Now is like the world doomed?
Well,
But I'm
and
not
right.
worried. I'm not thinking about that much at the end. So I think that's a good thing, that it doesn't. I'm not fucking dwelling on that at the end. I'm thinking
Right.
more about Charlie's death, or the dinner scene, or the dream that she has, where she
Oh
sleepwalks
yeah.
and
Yeah.
sees Peter with ants on his face, and then
Yeah.
it kind of like, and and here's and stuff I gathered watching it a second time. There are so many little breadcrumbs they do put in this movie about how her mom was involved in this cult. When Annie goes to the like little group therapy session, and she's talking about how her brother killed himself, because he said his mom was trying to put people in him. These seem like simple throwaway "your family is crazy" lines, but in the end, you're like, oh, she probably was. And how, because they were kind of estranged at the time of Peter's birth, I'm sure, the grandma would have loved to have been around for that, because they needed him as a vessel for this sexist demon who needs a man, because he also is male. I have issues with that. Demons having human sexuality, whatever, or gender. It's dumb. But bits, little bits like that. The you know And and you have to wonder, is there this subconscious thing within Annie that kept Peter away from her mom? It's like that thing, as you grow up in a house, like, I'm not saying either of us specifically, but I'm sure there are, not every parent is great. There are parents who do terrible things, but they aren't open about it. But a kid can get a sense like, oh, my dad's doing something weird, or my mom hangs out with people who make me feel uneasy. But it's never a something that's spoken about. It's something held inside. So did Annie subconsciously know her mom was bad, and
Yes.
that's why she was keeping, her family away? And she says in this dream sequence how she tried to not have Peter. She tried to miscarry every
Right.
way they told her not. Everything they told her not to do, she tried to do. So subconsciously, she was trying to still protect her family without knowing why.
Right. And I think that just in listening to you describe it that way, which is so dead on, I feel like the best way, if somebody hasn't seen this movie, or even if they have, they can pick up where at whatever stage they're at. I think the best way to watch this movie is to sandwich it. You should watch it, then you should read about it, and then you should watch it again.
Yeah, that's
or,
not bad.
or at very least watch it. I think if a movie ever warrants multiple viewings, it's certainly this one. I don't think a one and done does the movie justice. Some people might say, well, then it's not a successful movie then if you can't get everything from one viewing. But really, I think it speaks more to the richness of the movie.
Yeah, that's a bullshit. If anyone
Right.
says, watch The Sixth Sense and tell me that, like, I shouldn't have to watch that again. There's not
Right.
Fight Club. There's nothing in that I need to watch again.
Right. Yeah. No. I
Spoilers
really
for those two 20-year-old movies.
Right. No, but you should watch them again, and I think, kind of going back to something that I said earlier, if you go into this movie and with an open mind and just telling yourself that you're going to taste a different flavor, then you hopefully, like I did, will get past your sort of visceral initial reactions to it and see it for what it is, which is ultimately, hey, let's face it, this is not Slumber Party Massacre 2.
No.
This is so farly different from Slumber Party Massacre 2 that it's barely the same genre. And that's beautiful. That's what's so great about horror. And, we were talking last week about why we do this podcast. I think that that's part of what makes horror so great, is that it's such a wide swath of possibility for people to have different takes on this genre. And yeah, this movie, it just offers you, it's like when you taste ginger for the first time in a dish. Like, you're like, well, I kind of like that, but that's kind of weird. Like, that's different than what I'm used to. That's not barbecue, and it's not salt, but I like it, but I don't like it.
And it's spicy? Like, what?
Right. And that's what this movie is. You like it and you don't like it, but either way, you're drawn to it. And
so I'm getting from you not only a recommend, but recommend watching it twice.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
which I didn't think I was
recommend.
going to do. I thought that this was going to be my first not recommend. My first, I literally, when I was watching it again for the second time, I just said, I wrote down my notes. I'm like, this movie is no fun. This movie isn't enjoyable to watch. And, and I was like, not fuck this movie, because I appreciate the artistry. But the more that I just calmed down a little bit and saw everything that it had to offer and told myself that maybe it's okay to taste something a little different, that's when you see everything that it has to offer.
Yeah.
And you should watch it twice to get that.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I also recommend, my computer is heating up, so we're going to wrap this episode up. So yes, that's Hereditary from 2018, directed by and written by Ari Aster. First of many to come that I'm excited about. He's already a guy, I'm going to see everything he does, no matter, he's already like a Fincher or a Nolan for me. So I'm excited about his next stuff, or David Eggers. So yeah, that was it. Please follow us on Instagram at Slumber Podcast Massacre. Our email, give us an email if you have any questions, concerns, you want to talk about dumb things we've said. If you have suggestions for movies we might do, email us at slumberpodcast@gmail.com. Our Patreon is patreon.com/slumberpodcastmassacre. Huge thank you to our patrons. From Patreon, you help make the show possible and cover our costs, and we couldn't thank you more. I also wanted to real quick say again thanks to Sarah Dooley for our theme song. She has a new like a song out with a short film that goes along with it. Check it out. It's called My Party. Love what Sarah's doing. She's making all of us proud here from town that she grew up in. We love you, Sarah. So yeah, that's it. Next week we're going to, this was a listener recommend, so we're going to try it out. From 2000, The Cell with Vincent D'Onofrio and Jennifer Lopez, and a serious Vince Vaughn, and a blink if you miss it Peter Sarsgaard. But that'll be next week. Tim, you got anything else to say about this movie?
Well, did it miss out on an amazing opportunity to feature the phrase "D's nuts"? Was an opportunity missed there, or maybe it's best without it.
Charlie, what are you joking on?
Maybe that's in that 40 minutes on the cutting room floor. Who knows?
All right, Tim. Well, all I gotta say is,
yeah, there it is.
All right, bye, Timmy.
Bye.